Good morning. Once again, welcome to the Nehru Science Center's lockdown lecture series. All of you are aware that ever since the lockdown began, the Science Center has remained locked to the visitors. But then what we have done is we have ensured that we remain connected with all of you through some kind of a virtual programs. And one of the virtual program that we have been organizing is the lockdown lecture series. We have also organized several other programs, the night sky observation, live streaming of the solar eclipse. In the series of the lockdown lecture series, we are extremely privileged and honored to have with us the former chairman of ISRO, Dr. A.S. Kiran Kumar sir. Kiran Kumar sir has very kindly accepted our invitation to speak to our esteemed audience, all of you, on the subject space sector and opportunity for India. Talking about the COVID times, when all of us are actually stationed in home, there is a lockdown in all across the country. Although the number of COVID cases is about 1.4 million, but what is heartening is that the recovery rate is very, very high. It's continuously increasing. And the fatality rate also is coming down. It's almost about 2.6 now % of the people who are affected are the fatality is involved. And although 14 lakh people have been affected, the number of people recovering are very, very high. So hopefully we will pass through this situation. But then one institution which keeps the morale of the people very high, the way when we have cricket, all across the nation, everybody logs in together as one country. ISRO's achievements are one thing which are celebrated all across. For example, the Mangalyaan, when we have the Mars orbiter mission launched, the success of that, Chandrayaan-1, even the Chandrayaan-2, where there was a tribute to the Vikram Sarabhai, who incidentally is the founding father of ISRO, and whose centenary we started last year. We were so honored that Kiran Kumar sir had come for the centenary celebration conference, which we had organized at the Nehru Science Center. During that conference, we had informed that at the Nehru Science Center, we'll be opening one gallery titled Hall of Aviation and Space. We thought that would be a beautiful tribute for the centenary tribute. And we wanted to open that on the 12th of August next month, on the birthday of Sarabhai. Unfortunately, because of the COVID conditions, that is not going to happen. Maybe it will take another month or two. When the center is open, we will be opening this gallery and throwing it open to the people. I think Kiran Kumar sir needs absolutely no introduction. All across the country, everyone is aware of what ISRO does. But briefly, I would like to say that Kiran Kumar sir started his career at the place where actually it is called as the crucible of ISRO in Space Application Center in Ahmedabad. In 1969, actually, ISRO was formed. Although it was a part of initially it was a part of the Department of Atomic Energy. Space Application Center is one place where a lot of the topmost scientists, be it Kasturirangan sir, U.R. Rao sir, of course, Sarabhai himself, they all started from there. Kiran Kumar sir held that illustrious position, which was held by none other than Vikram Sarabhai, the greatest of chairman, Satish Dhawan sir. Then we had M.G.K. Menon, U.R. Rao. In that illustrious chair, sir occupied that chair. And he is going to be speaking on space sector and opportunity for India. I think all of us remember that small site program, which brought about a revolution in terms of television transmission. We now have more than 500 television channels, and we, at one stroke of a remote, we can change channels, get lots of information, entertainment, and news. So to talk about the news, the opportunity that have come on knocking at the door of India in space sector, sir, may I request you to kindly take the stage and do speak to us, sir. Thank you so much again, sir.
Thank you, Shiv Prasad. Thank you for that introduction. And also welcome to all the participants of this virtual program. In fact, I should compliment Shiv Prasad and Jawaharlal Nehru Science Center for keeping the activity going and keeping the virtual visitors interested in this activity. Compliments to them. And also thank him for this opportunity to share with you what we have done in space and how things can, how India can take advantage of what is going to happen in space. So what I intend to do is take you through a journey. Okay. So what I intend to do is actually take you through a journey of how India made use of this space technology and how the developments took place, where we stand today, and what are the what is the thinking today of how we can go ahead. Probably like Dr. Shuprasad just mentioned, we are all grateful to a personality, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, whose birth centenary we are actually celebrating from August 12th of 2019 to August 12th of 2020, this 1 year long celebration, to remember how a great visionary he was and how his vision made the entire country take advantage of a technology. One of his statements, if you recall, is our national goals involve leapfrogging from a state of economic backwardness and social disabilities, attempting to achieve in a few decades a change which has historically taken centuries in other lands. This involves innovation at all levels. Vikram Sarabhai. So in fact, it is Dr. Sarabhai's positive approach out of our predicament, and that he says a positive approach out of our predicament lies in finding solutions where the particular disadvantage of developing nations, which is that they have little to build on, is made an asset rather than a liability. It is necessary for them to develop competence in advanced technologies and to deploy them for solutions of their own particular problems, not for prestige, but for on sound technical and economic evaluation involving commitment of real resources. So if you look at what was his vision was use of space technology for national development. And towards this, how things went about, we will see that first was a question of capability demonstration. That means a technology of space, how it can be used for various problems we have on hand. And then once you have built a capability, how to move on, and then how to build capacity for harnessing this space technology to meet not only national, societal, and strategic needs, but also to be a significant player in space economy. Today, we can say that over the last many decades, what ISRO has done is this capability demonstration and bringing to practical use the use of this space technology. And today, we are on the threshold of making sure that India can be a very significant player in this use of space technology. Probably just to recall, it was in 1947 that we got our independence, and the first object went into space put up by Russians on the 4th of October 1957, which is considered as the dawn of space age. And it was Dr. Sarabhai's vision and his efforts of bringing in this technology of going into space and using objects from space to not only observe Earth, but also do communication, that has made a change. He made use of his friendship with many scientists across the globe, and within the 6th year of the first satellite being put into orbit, India had in Tumba, an equatorial rocket launching site, a sounding rocket was put into orbit. And starting from, you can see practically no infrastructure. Today, we have a self-reliant space infrastructure in operation. In fact, the very first thing was, see, you can imagine just at the 10 years after independence, the government has to be convinced that a technology of space can be beneficial for the country. What Dr. Sarabhai did was he convinced not only the government but also NASA that they should allow us to make use of one of their advanced technology satellites, a satellite called ATSF. It was brought into orbit by Americans, and borrowing this for 1 year, India conducted the world's largest socio-technological experiment between 1975 and 1976, which benefited almost 2 lakh people in 2,400 remote villages of our country. And at that time, just to realize that it's only the 4 metros which had the opportunity of seeing television broadcast through terrestrial networks. If at that time India were to follow the technology of terrestrial broadcasting, not only it would have taken a long time, but also it would have resulted in spending a lot of money. So Dr. Sarabhai brought in this concept because he was aware that Arthur Clarke had already shown that if you put a satellite in geostationary orbit, you can use it for covering 1/3 of the globe for broadcasting. So he had the vision of looking at how this technology can be used. The villagers not only were given information about health and farming practices, they were able to see the programs live in their villages using what we can call as a direct community, similar to today's direct to home television. There was direct to community sets with a chicken mesh antenna and front-end hardware developed at Space Application Center. And another very important concept which he brought in was the use of how the technology has to be developed in the country. While at that time, the indigenous technological capability was very limited, he was able to convince through his friends and fellow scientists across the globe that in India, we have a unique place near Trivandrum, which is a geomagnetic equator. And if at that place, if we conduct upper atmospheric research, it will be beneficial for the entire scientific community. And with this, he was able to bring the sounding rockets in the form of kits, assemble them and launch them. For this, the church, what you are seeing, is the place where the first rocket assembly happened. And also for conducting this experiment, he had to take the help of the priest and convince the fishermen in that region that you need to vacate this place for us to conduct this space experiment. If you allow us to do these experiments, one day in future, the country will benefit. Just as though to prove this point, from 1999 onwards, India was able to provide to our fishermen, we have a long coastline, almost 7,500 kilometers of coastline. And using the satellite images from the orbit and using the communication capabilities that were established, we were able to generate the prospective fishing zone information. That means where to go for fishing. See, from 1999 onwards, the fishermen in the country were being provided with a specific information, initially through pagers and then electronic signboards or through telexes to the fisherman community. But today, by making use of the NAVIC capability, a small gadget which is battery operated is fitted into the boat of the fisherman. And with this, when the fisherman is in the ocean, not only does he know where he is, but through an app in his mobile itself does not require any connectivity to terrestrial tower, because you can easily imagine once he gets into the ocean, no terrestrial tower is accessible to him. But then the mobile in his hands communicates to these gadgets through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and an app in the mobile actually points to him like a video compass shows him where he has to go for the fishing. Not only that, in his mother tongue, he gets updates on any weather vagaries that could occur, the state of roughness of the ocean, and all this. So he's able to do his job of catching good fish in the ocean. So you can see here an example of a person who does not know reading or writing, taking advantage of satellites operating in space and communication and navigation satellites, providing him specific information. In fact, this is one of the very good operational system which is providing information to the fisherman community. So what Dr. Sarabhai had promised the fishermen became operational, and the services are increasing. Another very important aspect of space technology was the weather monitoring and then cyclone track prediction, which today, by virtue of the satellites we have, we are able to provide to the India Meteorology Department near real-time information about the cloud movements, cyclone formation, cyclone genesis, and then tracking as well as predicting the cyclone track, which is accurate to within 20 kilometer in position and about half an hour in time. And with that, it's able to do. So starting from the initial borrowed satellite usage, India continued its efforts of developing the indigenous space technology. And our first communication satellite, INSAT-1 series, was put into orbit in 1980. And at that time, the satellite, again, it was a very innovative application which was found, where for the first time, a satellite which was capable of performing communication, broadcasting, as well as meteorology, all three in a single satellite was conceived. At that point of time, nobody had ventured into such a complex satellite realization. And then what we call 3-in-1 was made. And since at that point of time, our own indigenous capability was limited, first generation of INSAT satellites were fabricated against our design in an American firm. And then INSAT-2 onwards, all the satellites, communication satellites, we have been building indigenously. And today you have a capability of operating in various frequency bands for communication, for broadcasting, direct to home television, VSAT operations, say stock exchanges, or our ATM operation, and telemedicine, teleeducation, a host of them. And then by 2000, middle of 2000, start of DTH happened, direct to home television. And today we also have a multi-beam signals covering India and broadband high throughput satellites, which is capable of providing up to about 19 gigabits per second capacity. And very soon it's going to increase to almost 100 gigabits per second capacity. All this is going on. And then in addition to that, navigation itself, today we have our own navigation constellation, which provides ability to with using small gadgets, you can locate yourself. And this is an indigenous version, which is different from what others had done. By using only a 7 satellite constellation, we are able to provide to India equivalent of GPS system. And today it also has a unique messaging system. We saw how it is being used for the fishermen. And we also have a program called Gagan, which enables any GPS enabled receiver system on the aircraft to make use of it for providing safety of life and signal integrity assured service, which is certified by Director General of Civil Aviation. And all aircrafts which are beyond the January of 2019 registered in India need to carry this receiver and make use of this Gagan system. And then Earth observation, as you can visualize from space, you can look at Earth and see what is happening. Like we saw cloud and cloud motion monitoring starting from Aryabhata, Bhaskara in the 70s. Today we have a host of satellites which can give us looking at information as good as few tens of centimeters, about 30 centimeter resolution imaging, looking at them almost some of them in near real time and some of them with a gap of few days. Today you have a capability of covering sub-meter resolution and also video imaging capability using this satellite. And apart from visible and infrared imaging, we also have microwave imaging capability. And microwave imaging, you can imagine India during the monsoon period between June and September is cloud covered. And if you are looking from space, you will be in the visible and infrared wavelength region. You will be handicapped by clouds masking the observation. So to overcome that, the microwave region radars operate and they provide, like we can see through the transparent glass, the microwave signal can see through the clouds and then provide the capability of observation. And we have such a capability today. And meteorological satellites, both in terms of the geostationary platform and also low Earth orbiting, which gives us ocean observation. And also we contribute to the international near real-time weather data for the benefit of the meteorological community. And we provide, using our scatterometer data, ocean wind vector information to the global community. Now, in the same way, we have a capability of hyperspectral imaging. Like we can see, our eye can see through the 400 to 700 nanometers, the wavelength. If you make them narrower and narrower, you can see much more information, and you can talk about crop pest, crop diseases, and then camouflage detection, and a host of such capabilities are there. Microwave imaging, this is both different types of radars. The advantage of this kind of imaging system is they carry their own source of illumination. Like when we take a picture from our mobile or a camera using sunlight, it's a passive sensor, and we make use of flashlight for taking pictures. In the same way, in microwave region, the signal is carried, the source is carried by the instrument. It illuminates and picks up the data. And using this, it can make observation during the monsoon period and also during the night or any time of the day. The data coming in various wavelengths. Then we have the navigation enabled positioning system available and digital elevation model data. All this along with the modeling and computation system, we are able to provide for governance, for socio-economic security, a number of other application activities. And ISRO has worked with many of the state and central government departments, and the space technology is progressively being used by all these departments for their activities of planning, monitoring, and development. And there was also a significant effort to make the different government, both central and state government departments, and an event was conducted where Honorable Prime Minister himself participated and spoke to the secretaries about the advantages of space technology, and then actually promoting greater use of these technologies. Today, many of these capabilities are being used on a regular basis, whether it is Manrega activity or for Jal Shakti Abhiyan or Housing for All. Many of these things, these technologies are being used. While all this was done, we also did work on space science and space science experiments, because right from Aryabhatta time till Chandrayaan 2, recently what we did, Mars mission, and then we also provided opportunity for various student communities, both nationally and internationally, for carrying out various activities. And then during this period, we have done from imaging, means the orbits, we have used low Earth orbit, geostationary platform, Moon, Mars, and then in future you will also have Venus and other programs. And then the space science itself, you had a number of these activities which were done. This showcases some of the examples of that. And this shows, for example, Mars Orbiter mission, which actually showed to the world that it is possible to conduct even interplanetary missions in a manner which is very different from what world had been used to till that point of time. And today you will be happy to know that the satellite is still going around the Mars, while the original plan was only for 6 months. Now we'll be actually completing 6 years in comes this September. And very recently, we also got the images of Phobos on one of the moons of Mars. And this is a unique demonstration of capability that happened. And during this period, starting from 1963, if you look at, we have done more than 192 missions and about 50 launches of PSLV, out of which 48 have been successful. Then we have our own geostationary satellite launch vehicle, GSLV, Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 3. Then we have done more than 109 satellites of our own launched. And not only have we done our own launches, we have done more than 300 plus launches, satellites of 33 countries. And we also did 104 satellites in one go. This became a point of international attention. And for doing all this, as you can imagine, starting from sounding rockets way back in 63, progressively we have grown. We have built our capacity today up to 4 tons to geostationary transfer orbit we can do. And we have also done R&D on re-entry missions, which is a precursor for our manned mission, then winged body re-entry, then some of the critical technologies for not only human space flight and semi-cryo engine, these are going on. And this is again a geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle Mark 3, which gives us 4-ton capacity. And cryo engine development is a very unique capability that very few countries in the globe have. And you are also required to carry on R&D to improve your capability and also be relevant in the coming days. And in this context, some of these examples of reusable launch vehicle and scramjet engine work has been done. And then today, Gaganyaan program, where originally the target was before the 75th anniversary of our independence, we should carry our Gagannauts and bring them back safely, was a target. Work is going on full swing in that, but then probably the launch itself may be getting slightly shifted, the launch schedule. But then there's another capability towards which ISRO is working, making use of the launch vehicle Mark 3, making it human rated, then environmentally controlled chambers for enabling the crew to survive in the environment. And see, one of the things is in doing all this, what leapfrogging Dr. Sarabhai was mentioning was one of the key aspects which India demonstrated. The very first thing was site experiment. At that point of time, though we were borrowing the technology from America and we were using it for the first time, we demonstrated, and it was the world's largest socio-technological experiment. It demonstrated to the world that you are capable of conceiving of ideas using technology that is accessible to you and then do it differently. Same way, subsequently by 1995, we had the highest resolution imaging in civilian domain. And as a result of that, we were able to set up a large number of ground stations across the globe. Mars Orbiter mission was again a demonstration of a capability of our PSLV being used for putting satellites into a launch orbit for Mars. Then the AstroSat is another example where today we have an ultraviolet telescope which operates in the ultraviolet region, and it is actually world's highest angular resolution telescope in operation, and it has already provided some unique data sets and 104 satellites when it was launched. All of this showed that you are looking at making use of the technology and in a manner which is very different from what others have done. So what ISRO has done over this period is, you can say, it made use of accessible technology to address specific problems we have and bring it to the use in the country. And then whatever technology was not available, it has developed indigenously. If you look at whether it is the cryogenic technology or launch vehicles, and using them very innovatively in all this. And today you can say we have reached a stage where the use of space technology and making use of it for addressing various problems of the country has been demonstrated, and a capacity has been shown. Today, what is required now is to go one step beyond whatever technological capability that has been built. Like, we are among the very few countries in the world which have the end-to-end capability of building launch vehicles, launching satellites, building payloads, and making use of all this data, put them to practical use. So today, whatever capability that has been demonstrated needs to be actually shared with the country's people, the entrepreneurs, private entities, and make sure that India is in a position to actually take advantage of this technological base and then move ahead. So if we look at what is it that is possible, during these periods, we have used our built up technical infrastructure, we have used academic interfaces like science and technologies, space technology centers, and then we have also got what is called academic institution interfaces, industrialization. We have made use of industry to a large extent, and then human resource development, technology transfer regimes, and more than about 300 plus technologies have been transferred so far, and we have developed a number of technologies. And if you look at in terms of launch vehicle, we have more than 80% of the work happens in the industry, but still major portion of the thing happens within the organization. And we have an academic interface where through Respond program, we interact with the scientists and engineers and technical people in the academic institutions and provide opportunities for working on various problems. And today, in terms of outreach, if you see, you have got across the country, 6 space technology incubation centers have been established, 6 regional academic centers are there. Then you have a Satish Dhawan Research Center for Space Science. Then existing academic chairs, 5 are there. Similarly, a number of new initiatives are being taken for space technology incubation centers in different regions of the country. And recently, under the Human Spaceflight Program, announcement of opportunity was also done on all these topics, where the academic institutions and the people in the country can contribute in these areas toward the Human Spaceflight Program. As you can imagine, human spaceflight activity can provide tremendous opportunity for science and technology, innovation, and useful. See whether it is radiation hazard characterization, space food related technologies, inflatable habitats, human robotic interfaces, space bioengineering. In fact, practically all aspects of science and technology get involved in that. And in all these areas, announcement of opportunity has been done, and there is going to be more and more opportunity for people in the country to contribute to this. So now if we look at what is there, what lies ahead, if we look at space is now you can consider as a 4th frontier. And starting from dawn, if you see, basically space is capable of providing you communication, earth observation, exploration, navigation, then strategic application, space station, space tourism, space habitats, all of these are possible. And then, like, it is considered as the 4th or the final frontier. Like we had land, ocean, and air. Human beings, as they started building tools and technological capabilities, they started conquering this land, ocean, and air. And today, the question is of conquering space for remote sensing, communication, navigation, and all of these activities which I mentioned already. And if you look at world, in the early 60s, you can see the orange shows the number of countries which are actually doing some activity in space. Compared to that, you see today, it has grown tremendously, and progressively more and more entities are coming into this. More than 40 nations are on full-fledged space activities, and more than 100 nations are using space systems and services. So it's not only for national development, but also for the entire humanity. And if you look at in terms of space economy, it shows that there is almost like 360 or $400 billion industry, where for launch vehicles, for satellites, for applications and services, there is a huge market and available. So today, India being one of the key players in technology area, how we can make ourselves a portion of this global economy is the task. And then apart from that, space is also for common good, where the space agencies and countries will continue to work together in an international arena, whether it is under United Nations auspicious Committee on Earth Observation or World Meteorological Organization or Coordination Group for Meteorological Satellites. Today, progressively, people are talking about mega constellations. Instead of few satellites, a satellite constellation providing services, a larger and larger number. Today, you have already heard of, for example, Planet Labs having nearly about 150 plus satellites providing imaging capability of the globe. Then Elon Musk and others, OneWeb, looking at putting a large number of satellites to provide communication capability, internet capability. And globally, not only looking at Earth itself, going beyond, going to the moon, going to Mars, both individual countries, but also as a group of countries working together is all that is happening. And then the various mission scenario, which goes to deep space, Mars transport capabilities, all these are in the discussions, and then various countries are working together on that. Other challenge that comes in space is, as you are quite familiar, in any city today, any city, traffic becomes an issue. In the same way, space, as more and more satellites get into the orbit, it becomes actually both functional and non-functional satellites. They can come in the way of each other. So it requires both space traffic managing and monitoring. And the space debris monitoring removal itself, an estimated market revenue of something like $2.7 billion in the mid to late 20s is what is expected. And this is actually how Starlink satellites looked at. The Starlinks is a constellation which Elon Musk is putting for providing internet across the globe in any remote part. So the traffic management becomes one of the issues. ESA has done some work on this. And then space mining is another area where there is a tremendous opportunity for the future, both in terms of entrepreneurship and then what one can get. Here again, there are many countries which are providing licenses to the companies for doing the work. And this is another area where the amount of type of materials which, when brought to Earth, can make a huge difference to our ability to not only make use of them for various activities, but also for survival. And some of the material is extremely important. So asteroids, reaching asteroids, mining from asteroids, all become activities of interest. And these are asteroids are leftovers from the early days of solar system, and they provide tremendous, I can say, mine or mineral availability. So minerals are of importance, and then future candidates for these activities. There are 2 million plus asteroids, 12,000 asteroids pass near to Earth every year. And then this value of the total, the asteroid mining related activity is talked of as $5 trillion. Then sample recovery, Hayabusa had conducted an experiment where they landed on an asteroid, pick up some material and came back. And then space tourism is again another very activity. You have also heard of companies selling tickets, one-way ticket to Mars. Progressively, this is catching up. Already multimillionaires have traveled to space as tourists through Russia as well as America. And there are companies which are trying to provide such opportunities. And whether it is Blue Origin or even SpaceX, they're looking at such tourism, and these are some of the actors of that. And then space colonies, whether it is lunar or Mars. And another activity which is going to happen from space will be energy resources. As you can easily visualize, solar energy which is available in a manner on Earth because of our rotation and because of the atmosphere, the sunlight is not continuously visible to us. But in space, you can make sure that you can have access to sunlight 24/7. So if you can convert sunlight into forms of energy which can be brought to Earth either by direct beaming or through other means, there is tremendous scope for generating renewable resource which will be adequate for usage on Earth. So this is another area where a lot of R&D and work is going on and can become a huge potential for energy generation. And then launch vehicles itself, more and more companies are getting into this. And already you have seen Elon Musk going ahead and then providing launches. Not only he's providing launch service of crew being taken to the space station, more and more such companies are entering into, even in within the country. If you see, there are a number of companies which have started as startups and started working. And actually, if you see, whether it is Exceed Space or Team Indus, Dhruva Space, Earth to Orbit, Xovian, many of them are Bellatrix, to whom ISRO has even given a contract for one of the microwave thermal propulsion system that is being done. So if you look at in this sense, all the gist of what I was trying to convey to you is the Sarabhai's vision of using space technology for national development. The last few decades from the 60s to now, you can say, has been one of capability demonstration. And as the resources which were made available to the organization, based on that, continuously develop capability, technological capability in the country, and showcase that we can make use of this technology for a host of activity which serve us for communication, navigation, remote sensing, and also for both strategic, non-strategic, and for bringing livelihood applications to the common man. All this today, the basic technological base is there, but what we need is a capacity, and that capacity requires a large number of players, not only players, but also the funding. The government itself wants to do more and more. The commercial activities should happen in the industry, and government should concentrate more and more on governance and also concentrate on societal good and those activities which are otherwise not economical from commercial point of view. That is to be done by the government. So towards this, the effort is, even the recent announcement by the government is basically in this context, how India can take advantage of the base which has been created, where you have a number of launch vehicles which can provide service, the technological capabilities that have been established, and a huge opportunity which is there in terms of the global market, which could be like $400 billion for the launch vehicle, satellite application area, and beyond that, trillions of dollars in the economy, which of course requires not only R&D and investment, but also the thirst for the actually, you can say, research and development, and also deep pockets, because space business is actually a very risky business. And in spite of many successful launches, you can still have failures. And there is a tremendous amount of, you can say, risk involved in this. But notwithstanding this, no risk, no gain, and the capability has to be done. And we stand at this threshold. Now the government is trying to put its effort, bring in policies, and then enabling people in the country, industry, as well as academia and the student community to make use of this base which has been created and go ahead and then take advantage of this ability and meet not only national and societal strategic requirement, but also become a very significant player in the space economy. Space economy, which I pointed out, could be in the range of a few trillions of dollars, which could be coming up. So this is where we stand. Capability demonstration has happened. Capacity growth is required. India itself requires at any given for both its monitoring and then strategic requirements, more than 150 plus satellites in operation. Today we have about 50 plus in operation. So there is a tremendous requirement from that. And then beyond that, there are a large number of requirements, whether it is broadband connectivity or the very, you can say, low latency, continuous connectivity in broadband. All these areas you require capacity to build up. And this is where we stand. What Dr. Sarabhai's vision of using the space technology for India, it has demonstrated what it is worth. And now we are on this threshold. In the coming years and decades, India has to move ahead and become a very significant player in the space economy. So this is where the opportunity given to me by Nehru Science Center to communicate to you this aspect, I thought is what I will use. So thank you very much for the patient hearing. And if you have any specific questions, I would be more than happy to attempt answering them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. There are some of the questions which have come up. I will pose one or a couple of them to you, sir.
Yeah.
There is one, Mr. Samit, I don't know from which place he is. He says that when is IDRSS launching? We have been hearing about Indian atomic clocks since long time. Can you please update on this one?
Yeah, actually the atomic clock development is a very critical development for the country, from the navigation satellites and very high time accuracy thing. We have now actually gone through that development, and we have been able to develop the engineering model of that, and the flight model is getting actually fabricated. And then in a year's time, we expect to use our own indigenous atomic clock based navigation satellites going up into space. So the development has been very rigorous, and it has been successfully done, and we will be using them in our coming satellites. So the first of it is likely to get launched in about a year's time.
So another question, when can we expect the reusable rocket Admire to take flight?
Yeah, as you can visualize, reusable launch vehicle concept is a concept where more and more parts of the launch vehicle we should be able to bring back and use them again. And in this, the amount of work that is required to be done is quite huge, and we have only initiated. And again, this is where the capacity in terms of resources also comes into picture. Not only are we required to make sure that all the current demands for launching happens, and then R&D activity goes on. This is where the balance has to be done. But notwithstanding these limitations, the efforts are on, and effort to find even the first stage vehicles which are dependent on liquid engines which will be more amenable for reusable cases compared to solid rockets, solid motors, which are the boosters which we are using today. That also needs to be changed. And the reusable launch vehicle concept of previously virtual landing on water has been demonstrated. Now landing on the land space itself is going to be attempted next. And there is a plan which goes through this cycle of development. And as the resources and the timelines of the development happens, the effort will be going on.
There are quite a number of students, I think maybe students, they're all asking certain questions that, sir, we're all interested in ISRO. How can we join ISRO?
Yeah, actually ISRO takes in every year, there are two ways. One is you also have the Indian Institute of Space Technology, where there is a BTech program in 3 of the topics which is there. And anybody who enters that, once he crosses a minimum threshold on his completion of that, becomes eligible for absorption in ISRO. That is one way. Otherwise, every year ISRO recruits between 150 to 200 people, and then advertisements are done on the national level. And beyond that, those who do PhDs, they become eligible for a direct entry through a special review mechanism. There is a register where these PhDs who have done some relevant work can register, and if their work of activity or their field of activity is of importance, they'll be called for a special review interview, and if they are found fit, they'll be absorbed. And these are the mechanisms through which ISRO actually takes in people. Apart from that, today, both in terms of aerospace technology, there is more and more opportunity within the country through the industry, because as you can see, if India has to become a partner, has to take a significant part of the global economy, more and more industries have to actually do business in this area. So definitely there'll be more opportunities is what we expect.
So there's Deepthi. Can we ever try to, I mean, the rockets are, the technology is rapidly progressing. She's asking, can we ever try to make rockets which can reach the speed of light?
Yeah, that is a challenge for you, Deepthi. See, today, what you can say is the chemical propulsion system, which is able to give us up to 10 to 20 kilometers per second. Then you have got the electric propulsion, and even people are talking about propellant-less propulsion. And then for future, even trying to make use of antimatter for propulsion. So it's actually an area where some ideas are there, but unless a lot of research and then some breakthrough findings are there, how to make sure that we have propulsion speeds which are significantly higher than what has been achieved today by humanity. We will not be able to do interplanetary travel or intergalactic travel, etc., if at all has to become a reality. Today's speeds of 10 to 20 kilometers per second is going to be woefully inadequate. Even to go to Mars at this speed, it requires almost 10 months, 9 months. So the challenge is to find ways and means of reaching higher and higher speeds. And that is where the next generation researchers have a challenge cut out for them. And I'm sure there'll be ways of doing, but then we have to keep trying.
There's an interesting question, sir. There is some Mr. Shirsat. He says ISRO is doing a lot of, successful launch, etc. Unlike NASA, they are very inactive on social media. So most of the young generations are looking at the social media for, being attracted to space. So can we make ISRO active on social media and PR?
Yeah, I appreciate what you are saying. It's not that we have not done, attempts have been done, but primarily what you have to realize is all activities what we do is also constrained by the resources, both in terms of monetary and then human resources. So within the constraints of what can be done, ISRO is continuously putting its best effort, by, in fact, people are actually putting in their times much more than what normally one would expect. But then, in spite of all that, we are woefully inadequate in meeting the demands of outreach, both in terms of social media and other things. One of the key constraints is always the resource, both in terms of human as well as in monetary. And as the government, or as India becomes, you can say, more economically stronger, it can probably afford to spend more on these activities. And at that time, probably there'll be much more, you can say, freer access available.
There's another question. I think it is Deepti Kale, I think. We are actually trying for Mars. Can India also try for Jupiter, missions to Jupiter and Saturn?
Yeah, currently, of course, some of the efforts are for Venus is on, but then there is a scientific board which looks at what should be the possible system that we should look for, and then over a period of time, what should be our target in space science. So among the studies, these things will be included, but then currently, again, within the limitations of the resources that can be made available for these activities, we have to balance between our technical capability, then the resources available, and then plan our activities. At this point of time, we have probably a Venus mission, which is on the anvil, but then for Jupiter and for Saturn, still it will be a little time away.
There are several questions from visitors. I will not be able to take each one of your questions, and some of them are on black holes and things like that. So there is one Partha Joshi, I think. Is India trying for a space station of its own?
And naturally, as you can visualize, once you get into this business of human space activity, space station, and then habitat means living outside Earth, all this becomes a natural corollaries. And it's again, the nominal steps which any activity which is interested in human space will move forward. Space station also will be an activity of interest for India, and it will move ahead. Today, some of the experiments which are being done using our fourth stage of PSLV rocket as a temporary station, and then conducting some of the experiments using that by providing both communication and then power source for that is being attempted, so that it is like a poor man's habitat for this thing, making an effort. But then the space station is also a natural corollary to India's human space program.
So there's one, I forgot the name. So I want to be a Gagannaut and be on Gaganyaan.
Yeah, definitely the opportunity should be there, because as India gets into this human space program, it is not going to end up with just one launch. So there'll be continuing programs, and then over a period of time, there'll be many opportunities which will come up, and then you keep looking for those opportunities, and then as and when those announcements are made, you can probably become a part of that. And if you are capable of meeting all the requirements of that particular applications which are going to be announced or opportunities that are announced, you will be able to become a Gagannaut. So wishing you a great success in your efforts.
So one last question, because there are, I mean, you mentioned about $400 billion commerce and $5 trillion commerce for asteroid mining. There are very few countries who are actually space going. What percentage do you think India can aspire from this business of $400 billion and $5 trillion? This is one question from one of the...
No, as far as the $400 billion economy which is concerned, there today we may be in the range of 2 to 3%, but then definitely in the near future, it should reach 10 to 15% is a possibility, provided both we from the government and the industry is able to actually negotiate all the issues that are there. There are many complicated issues which one gets into because of the nature of the business, because of the nature of risks involved, because the dual use activities. There are many issues, but then the effort has been started, and I'm sure we should be able to reach somewhere between 10 to 15% of that in near future.
There are several questions which I'm sure we are already running out of time. I think you're given us 1 hour time. So again, on behalf of all our esteemed audience who have logged in online, again, they'll be seeing again and again. I would like to thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation and taking quite a lot of questions. I know the students will be having more and more questions, but ISRO, I know there is both on tweet and Facebook, ISRO is quite active, but not to the level of NASA. So again, sir, once again, I would like to thank you very much for accepting our invitation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Wish you all the best in your efforts to continue to do this for more and more online interaction with your Jawaharlal Nehru Science Center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.